just we'll begin with the transmission of the Amitayus Sutra. A few people told me or asked, can I come for the sutra? I can't stay for the whole session. That's never a problem. So stay as long as you can, and when you need to go, you need to go. I think it's great that people come, and sometimes life happens. You can't stay for the whole 2 hours, so that's absolutely no problem. Um, as we come to the mantra, I think I did a whole spiel about this. There's different versions of the mantra. So the version that you hear Geshe reciting will not be the version that you see in the FPMT text. However, Dave found a really excellent footnote about this on the 84,000 site and its version of the Amitayus Sutra. So if you're curious about why there's these different mantras, or dharanis more accurately, that will explain it. It's basically related to different versions of the canon, different versions of the Kangyur. So this is special today, and then we'll have our normal teaching. Hello?
Yep.
Oh, okay. And then we'll have our normal teaching with the question and answer at the end. And just next Saturday, we also have something special in the morning at 10 a.m. in honor of the 1 year anniversary of our teacher Lama Zopa Rinpoche manifesting passing away. Geshe will give the transmission of the Jampe Shelung, Jampe Tsenje, the chanting the names of Manjushri practice. So you're very welcome to come for that. This is the text that His Holiness the Dalai Lama recommended for the swift finding of Rinpoche's reincarnation. Then on the evening of that day, if you're local, we'll have an in-house puja of the Lama Chopa, the Guru Puja here. And then on the Sunday, it will be, as usual, continuing with this series of teachings. We've also developed a new question and answer format. So Abhilash was kind enough to make a form that when you put your answer in a little box, you press something and then you see the answer come up. So we hope people enjoy that. And then the following weekend will be the Vajrayogini teaching on the Saturday and this series on the Sunday. So I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll get started. I'll just invite Geshe down.
Hey, Caterpillar, you're muted.
Hi everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Kangatashi Dele Abukore.
And could you hear Geshe-la's Tashidele?
Can
All
he
right.
point his mic toward him a little bit more? Point, like his mic is not pointing to him.
Like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, especially as Geshe-la begins the transmission, let me know if I should switch to the musician sound off, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, Tachiro Kangatashi Dele, Kangatani, Kimoto Taya Poloshi.
So Geshe-la said, Tashidele, welcome to everybody. He hopes that you are all well and happy today.
Anita Rosso Sogatane, Takarsaka, Novel Lembe, the little lady, Nova, the Tobas of Imatala, but Timando, me so much curious.
And think that with this human body, it is as if we have arrived at an island filled with precious jewels. And when we need to leave this island, we want to make sure that we don't leave empty-handed.
Oh, that Suho Nuji, Suho Kaze Yaboyaba, Koraja, Temota, Donas, Hosta was.
Yeah, so it's just like if you kind of go into the shop and you just look around, but you don't buy anything, you haven't really come away with something useful.
Oh, did Ane thank you bolle de kasonganzo chi dewanganzo do chaseres. Rewa holistic kan do yores. But you know the lava noji. Nimbo maybe jala latini. Nimbo le lemba sa ka chimotan yung yores newa nola.
So there's a profound line in a text by the protector Nagarjuna called In Praise of Dharma Dhatu. And Geshe-la's been teaching that to a group of Dutch students every month. And in that it says, we seize the essence of something that lacks essence. We seize the essence of something that lacks essence.
Oh, ta noji pare yajin do yaji tembo do yaga sonse se me ta se deva yina. Oh, ta madu tando de se yina yo ta li koro nimbo me banda bo kene le do nyamo gi jagi chala. Oh, tani chires.
So, to explain this a little bit, when we speak about different kinds of sentient beings, whether human, animal, and so forth. And we talk about this essence. If we have this body, but we don't put any effort into study, practice, and so forth, then we don't take any essence from it.
Ta yina yo likoro koi lire, sache ge lire. O ta dewa yo ngazolo yo ba de sache ge dewa re.
So the body we have, just to clarify, is what is known as contaminated. It is in the nature of samsara. And connected with that, then, the happiness that we experience is known as contaminated happiness.
Ta yina yo dela tene, ani nimbo roya chi yo res, ya po chena ngaros.
But the paradox is that on the basis of this body, we can derive an essence. In other words, we can come away with something worthwhile.
Oh, ta tendi chi ta te hale be sa chembo koi lila tene ko do mande li do toya. O sa che ge dewa le so me ge dewa do toya. O ta ngazolo ta ko kan dele yo ga chi ina so yo ma res.
So it's amazing actually when you think about it that on the basis of this body through practice, on the basis of this samsaric body, we can achieve a body that is beyond samsara. And similarly, through the practice of the teachings, on the basis of an experience of contaminated happiness, we can experience a completely uncontaminated happiness. And when we think about this, right, there's no opportunity greater than this.
Oh, se to ta ya ke chen bon ra wa shan la ma chong ka pa do ke ne pe ke pa mo bo jim ta manda wa chembo yo res. Ka shi ge sen lin ta ga rong go la ta te tan ta ke cha do ma re te ni ji ma la go ka res. Lama tsonga ba sen ni lit ga ro la re so no to ne no yo ma ra ma de ko yi li was sa che ge li was.
So another thing that Geshe-la wanted to explain is a little bit of a difference between Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of Tantra and some of the other Tibetan school scholars' presentation of Tantra. In terms of the practice of self-generation in deity meditation, in some systems they are saying that actually it is on the basis of this very body that we generate as the deity. Lama Tsongkhapa disputed that and said that actually we must first dissolve this ordinary contaminated body if we are going to arise as the deity.
다 단다 깨져도 말해 된다 당가서 리코로 가리면 단다 깨져 용기하러
And there's, a discussion that follows from that. This isn't really the occasion to go into depth about it, but there's a discussion that follows that, which is like, what is this body really like?
다 송지를 지서 좀말에 다 지고 돈바 설 따와 이나이 다 린드지라 되네 고로서 다 니모 저토야레스.
So whether we think about the Buddha, whether we think about the Venerable Tara and so forth, all of these beings who we look up to now, it was on the basis of a body like this that they were able to take the essence, that they were able to achieve something worthwhile.
다 맞게 대신 니가게 대시에서는 사체게 대화 거기와를 거기 대화 거기와를 그도 그래 간솔라바 디 토닐라 다 리도세 대고기고 지네다 템버더 거기와레스.
So, of course, as we are in samsara, we do need to have a taste and experience of that temporary happiness, of that contaminated happiness, of that samsaric happiness. But then in addition to that, as a practitioner, what we want to do is build on that and train our body and our mind to aim towards a more lasting, stable happiness.
다 던지게 되는 레가 첨버스는 뭐지 다 템버지 대시 템버스 잡아셔발라 리세 단단히 셔와지도 레레지 그게
And in order to be able to achieve that great happiness, that stable happiness, we need to start right now with putting our body and our mind in a calm, relaxed state.
자시 발라 잡고 예비 잔서치 발라 마시네 계제 잡아놓지 손도 거야레스.
So we want to stop the winds of the thoughts blowing so that that ocean, which maybe has some rough surf, some big waves, slowly it becomes still and even. Those waves dissolve.
저 할래비 도마지가 노노락 도도냐도 가르 나시고 통하는지 다 세대 된다고지 다 좀마 보초송 송거지.
And when the waves subside and the particles settle to the bottom, then from the surface of the ocean we can see very clearly, right to its depths, we can see everything within it. Think in this way, with our mind subdued, everything becomes clear.
timbato chai nyamate savodo sivoyo banujita sedeyo numato pa tasona wata tenujita sivodo sashiripa toichachi yo.
So think that just as when the sun is parted from clouds, we can see its brilliant radiance, in the same way, when our mind is settled, parted from discursive thoughts, then the fundamental clarity, the mind's aspects of clear and knowing, are revealed.
tene se jambani jaka tunela se yawa yabo moshiwa jizo yi samaji.
And then connected with the four foundations of mindfulness, let us cultivate the mindfulness of the mind, observing the mind and coming to understand it.
세가 노로로 있다니 세가 시에가 착가를 가르데 세가 예대가 착가를 가르데 소소가지 대통령이
And when we say come to understand the mind, this relates to a mindfulness where we can observe the faults as they arise in the mind, but also observe the positive qualities as they come forth in our mind.
세계 대게 차대지 가지 수치는 로소마 아니 시게 차르지 마 차중도 지금 마 말은 거는 어떤 정도 그래 소마지 차와도 중요한 거지.
And so, as we come to understand the positive qualities and the faults within our mind, what we'll see is that as we increase those qualities, naturally the faults begin to dissipate. Just as if heat is increased in a room, slowly, slowly the cold will dissipate.
타마 쇼바 타심바 이지 타심바 제바 타심바 쇼레스나 다루지 간가 시들티도 반야지 중그레서.
As we perfect these qualities, eventually we give rise to perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect patience, and we really become a being capable of guiding others to lasting peace and happiness.
대용 버스 주바 예대용 버스 주바 다 던지지 싶어라. 여기 사나 대다용 와지 다 소가 지지다요.
To be able to achieve my own welfare, to be able to work towards the welfare of others. It is for this purpose that I practice, and I will make a single-pointed praises and requests to the holy beings for blessing. Yeah, so Dave, I think I told you that we might do some extra prayers today, but in fact, Geshe said no, because some people might need to receive the transmission and move on with their day. So what we're going to do is just the normal prayers along with the Guru Rinpoche. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Can you guys hear me? I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Sorry, I was not.
Oh, okay. sorry. Tumbo chom den de jin je ba dra chom ba yan da bar zo be song ye re ba dang sha su dem ba de war she ba ji den gem ba ki bu du we ka lo gyur wa la na me ba la da mi nam gi tem ba song ge chom den de pe ja wa sha gya tu ba la cha se lo je de gya zu ji ho Tumba chon den de jin she ba dra chong ba yang da ba zo be san je je ba dang xiao zu den ba de wa xie ba xi den chen ba che bu de we ka lo jo wa la na me ba la da mi nam gi tumba song ge chom den de pe ja wa sha kya tu ba la la chase lo chede kyasu chi ho tenpa chonden de deshin sheba drachon ba yang daba zobe zanje reba dang shabsu denpa dewa sheba jiten chenpa chebu dewe kalo jorwa lana meba ladang mi namgi tenpa sangye chonden de pe jawa shakya tuba la chase lo chede kyapsu chi. So we'll do the prayers to Guru Rinpoche, and then we'll do the mandala offering and to the refuge, and we'll get started. Un hogen yogi no chan sam pe ma ge sar dom bola ya zen je ging junye pe ma junye jesu dra kodu kanjo mambe ko ge gi jesu da jogi jinji la jir jesu so guru pe ma sedi Om Ahum Benzu 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 Guru Pe Ma Sedi. Om Ahum Benzu Guru Pe Ma Sedi Om Ahum Benzu Guru Pe Ma Sedi Om. So we'll do a short mandala. Soji Pegi Joshin Medo Ram Ri Ram Linji Ni de Gembadi Sangye Jindu Mede Buvaye Jogun Nama Dajinga Chebarjo Idam Guru Ratna Mendala Kaniryadayami. So Geshe will lead refuge in Bodhicitta.
Sonje
Chedan sogi chenam la jonchu bardu dani kyasu chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi drola benjir sangye drobar sho. Chedan sogi chenam la jonchu bardu dani kyasu chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi drola benjir sangye drobar sho. Chedan sogi chenam la janchu bardu dani kyasu chi dagi chenyen gibe sanangi drola benjir sangye drobar sho.
뭐야 다 먹으시 살아도 다니엘 샤와니 스가다까지는 같이 뭐
So Geshe has shared it many times before, but just as a reminder, the activities at the beginning and at the end are something very important.
다 뭐다 사고치는 뭐야가니 다 녀도 릴라버데 코 가르세 가르 녀도 사고치도 녀도 가디나 되는 녀도 요라 와스테 노지레스 노게 세용.
So our mind is a little bit like something that has different personalities. And you know that like when a really kind of problematic, aggressive personality and like a really kind, positive personality are in the same space, it's going to be hard for the positive to kind of come out, right?
다 내서 들리지 자더니 게이세세하데 오세요 보세요 롱지가 좀보지 이자 코도더니 버게 좀 매베 세도 녀도 대하고 데스 바지 요래.
So, for example, when we talk about our mind, which really is connected to our fundamental nature, our mind of kindness, this a positive kind of mind, it's going to be hard for that to abide in a stable way when there's those problematic, aggressive, afflicted minds that are there.
다 세버게 템보지도 렐레 셔와야 보데도 마데 세다 세도 르니 보데 간조 라파 잔도 무시레스.
Yeah.
라파지
So whether that mind is able to abide there stable, right, in a very solid way or not, this is also connected with the wind, because the wind and the mind travel together. In fact, they're said to be like either side of the hand, the palm side and the top side.
다 야야 체토원 요래 체토벌레 그 류주중고네 다 버게래 같이 뭐지서 그 요래 갈래.
And actually, with our practice, what will happen is slowly, as we become more advanced, we'll become more and more capable of sort of working with and meditating with these subtle winds.
다 단다가서 보다 드리지래. 대 드리지 자다 농근 중앙이죠. 가서 렐레 쇼는 류야보 용이야. 류야보 차서는 다 세고라 로지가 렐레레스.
And so, connected with that, then, when the four elements are in balance, we are able to kind of more easily work with those subtle winds. And when we are able to bring those subtle winds into a little bit of control, then it becomes a lot easier to work with the subtle mind as well.
다 소소 리칼레 카고 셀레 노도 몽보샤와도 다 드리슈나 시인 중앙에서 차치 뭐 간지지래. 다 대노지 너요 대노지 난 중앙에 렐레 다 리세 시와조기 som바가디는 셀레 그거 요래.
So when the body is uncomfortable and when the mind is disturbed, one way of kind of thinking about this is as an imbalance in the elements, right? The earth, fire, air, water within ourselves. And we want to think, through settling the mind, may I bring these elements into equilibrium? And that will help us to establish that mental peace.
다 소소 그 가르세. 라자도 마스나. 다 버게 노도 몽보도 드리 저와 두자 이미갈 드리 제거 요레스.
Yeah, and so remember this advice when you're feeling disturbed, when you've got a lot of suspicion and discursive thought happening. That's the time to remember this advice.
다 드리지. 당연히 드리지. 다 중앙에 차는 바치는 다 렐레치는 로기 소비스는 렐레.
So we're just going to, before we begin the transmission, take a moment to tap into the mind to bring forth that state of peacefulness by thinking the four elements are in balance.
아니 세용 돈요가 뭐다 렐레라고 아니 좌송서.
The four elements are in balance, and at minimum, this leads the mind to a state of equilibrium, to its natural state of equanimity, neutral equanimity.
세용 가를 버게 따와 이나요. 고 갈레메바. 리용 되는지 갈레메바라고. 다 렐레 좌송서.
And from that state of equanimity, then whatever the mind examines, it will not be able to bring up perturbation or disturbance. Whatever state the body is in, it will not be able to bring forth disturbance.
세카디 이나요다 아니 집바데마 많이 봐 가제 터득하게 자체와 자시에 더 많이 소리.
think. I'm not just going to be satisfied with leaving my mind in the same state all the time anymore. I'm going to try to make my mind broader, establish a vast, open-minded attitude.
Chendiga nyel tawa nuji, pami senchel tawa yina ta yi to gwa. Ane ta ngomaji pata tini pasar tane odashe ke sel tawa yina ta yi to gwa ji ma to yi to mo gwa senchi ji ju mo so.
And on the basis of this, then think, all the beings connected with me, I see them as something worthy, attractive, with a mind of affectionate love. Not just those beings that are close to me, but also those strangers who are more distant. Also, even those people with whom I have difficulty, or might even see as enemies. All of these beings I see with affectionate love as beautiful.
Senchi sel tawa yina so so tane shomba. She sa gja. Iji she sa gja. Ota za chi mo ju so much.
Every being that I could possibly gaze upon is a potential foundation for arising compassion, is a potential foundation for arising love. In this way, every single last sentient being is precious.
Dona Malaya poti tendo roje yuzo pemba tatu chi so much.
On the basis of this positive human rebirth, I am going to bring forth something that is of benefit to both myself and others.
Chatsuma to get Sujima to me, I said, Nasa de das, one Jilka Zeta, Dotobachi. So we so just
In terms of the ultimate welfare of both myself and others, only Buddhahood will allow me to accomplish this. Therefore, for the sake of not just myself, but all sentient beings, may I achieve Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, perfect and complete enlightenment. Bring forth Bodhicitta.
What I cannot Jimmy Ketchachi, that thing that Sunji Compo Jabala Kota Yamara, Star Baj, the Taleka, much at the end of
So that's the motivation in terms of actualizing that full enlightenment. It's not something that's at all easy. So we have to go in stages, right?
What I could be talking to Yasaki Yamara.
And we know that when you have to climb the stairs to the top of a tall building, it's not necessarily an easy endeavor, right? It requires a little bit of effort.
That this is Taramba Tombo and it's also Devajugi,
And so we begin, right, with the practices of accumulation and purification, and with those practices as a basis, in a relaxed way, we kind of move forward through those stages. And so in order to do that, we need to amass a lot of conditions so that we can accumulate and purify effectively, and then connected with that, Geshe is giving this transmission.
어다 저더니 다다니야 근데 단계 시차로 때자 쳐더니 리코로 오예 되게 전에는 어때자 쳐보지래.
And when we look at we talked a little bit about the negative aspects of the human body, but when we look at the positive aspects, right, what the human body allows us, we see that it's actually quite a valuable basis. It is something precious. Yeah?
좀벌리 차츠와데 있더니 예진이 너버 그게 비자와 이나요다 리테도 가리하게 자체 그래서 단다 리테 자체 그래서 말했어.
In some teachings it said that actually if you were to cover the surface of the entire world with precious wish-fulfilling jewels, a human body would exceed the value of even that.
대 가리찬 시기 요래서는 키겠다. 내가 첨보스 제도 요해서 저도 리잖아 저거 요래서.
Why would that be the case? It's because with this human body one can achieve great positive things.
다 델로프게 다 체림보지도 다 가디 그다 가세트도 기보지도 아버지 그거 요래서.
And we want therefore to have longevity, a long life, and all of the facility for happiness in this human body.
가존의 소재조 된 데가 좀 조지세만도 말다 손지세만 얘네도 말했더니 그거 너는 넘바 손지세면 넘바지라마 레시자스 와스.
And so we said that this particular sutra, the Tsedo, or the Long Life Sutra, we mentioned this as beginning with a dialogue between Buddha Shakyamuni and the Bodhisattva Manjushri. So a divine aspect Bodhisattva, but ultimately we understand that Manjushri is a Buddha, but he emanates as this divine aspect Bodhisattva for the purpose of this sutra.
네, 내나한테 제보하면 신들이지 요래. 아니 제보하면 고롤은 니빠 첼롱와 레랑와 셰왈랑와 세다 다 니빠만 잡아들는들이 요래서 가서 뭐 자스모스.
And so the sutra begins by describing the abode of Amitayus, by describing the longevity bestowed by Amitayus, by the activities of Amitayus that take place in this Buddha field or in this Pure Land, and so forth.
다 첼롱와 세 책 가세들로 자니자 가세되나 바이 내 토비가 다 보게.
And so in terms of limitless life, we can think like as much of a lifespan as one needs, even up to 100 or 200 years, is possible through the practice of the sutra.
다 대우 가정한도 지만만이 봐 크시워지를 가정한도 단계 벌어져 로마지 아래 생각도 가정 메이드 다 도마송하스.
And so this isn't just kind of fairy tales, as we said. This has a kung, so this has a source. And in fact, we know that one of Nagarjuna's students, Nagarjuna passed away many years ago, right, hundreds of years ago, one of his students is still said to be abiding in this world due to achieving the power of longevity based on these kind of practices.
다 로베 디멜 로베 레이쇼주 유스문이 와스 로베 레이쇼주.
So he's known as, I don't know the Sanskrit, but the Tibetan is Lupin Lui Jangchup. Lui Jangchup.
레이쇼주 자가가 통 자나가 통세라마 스레 모치마 렌로케데 자가가 그니 칼레모모 자네 타말 라마 텐지네라 예산에 수시 모모시바이스.
And so there was an important Lama called Tongse Lama who brought the Dharma from India to China, and it is said that much of what he was able to accomplish in terms of that was based upon him traveling to India and meeting with this disciple of Nagarjuna and receiving teachings from this Lui Jangchup.
ngebollo pene lo ninjasa jatingyan ro sawara was inaye ti niche loma lobe leishon jisane sushi serta ya chembochiro was.
So this Chinese Lama, right, although Nagarjuna had passed away, he was able to receive unbroken lineage from Lui Jangchup, who had received all of those teachings from Nagarjuna himself. So kind of valid sources, right, for these attainments of longevity. So reciting this sutra at home, and perhaps as you recite it, making offerings to representations of body, speech, and mind, and so forth, will be a very effective practice for increasing your longevity and the longevity of others. So I am just going to adjust the settings so that you can hear Geshe-la's voice as clearly as possible.
I'm thinking if Geshe-la's chanting like, if it's chanting like, then it may cut out.
Oh, it might be better to leave as is. All right,
Yeah.
Dave, just you tell me how it sounds. If we need to adjust, we will. Okay. Yeah. Just
This one, oh, it happened there is a beja yoni about that.
So
Geshe,
So Geshe said, listen as he recites, because that's the transmission. If you have the text in front of you, you can look at the text, but that's not essential. The most important thing is to listen as well as you can.
Papa, Tedon, Ijipa, the Mebashi, Shawa, Tebachimindo, Yuso. Jagaketa aya paramata ayenjana, Jagaketa aparamata ayenjana, Nama, Mayana, Sutra Peketa, Papa Setu, Ijipa, the Mebashi, Tebachimindo, Suju, Sambato, Shan, Solo, the Geta Debati, Jina, Jodende, Yendo, Yebana, Jodende, Yendo, Yebana, the Tang, messages, Kangaravana, Gilojara, Jessican, Kavakin, the Chimoto, Sabachimorata, Momotot. 타지 더 주소 되네 주된 좀 봐잖아 저 발라 가자바 좀 봐. 띵거 주난지 되지 고에 대 받으면 봐. 시샤와지 되베테나 되지 좀 받아 좀 더 봐주베 손지 세동 이제 받으면 봐. 신도 넘방 엠바 지지 잡아 시샤와 주소 천저지 세타신 바제 대해서 제노 라바지 좀 대도 좀 봐잖아 좀 봐니 좀 멀리게 문노나 세 뒤와 로자도 봐. 샤도한테 대도알에 좀 봐제 나머지 많이 봐. 저한테 또 이게 내 마음에 봐줘 대도 미소니 받으면 주셔야 되고 알아는 디디디 레몬데 디디디 디디 좀바 세제 공도 되지 바바 천도 이제 받아 매 바바 뒤에 되는 거 맞지 뭐 용서 받지 봐 세자의 진노 좋은데 봐 이게 저고 이게 너 주고 미소니 또 루바나 로바니 멘토레고 라바체 데베 쳐나 총게 바도 바제도 메도도 베도 저바도 주바도 샤만도 저반저바도 제용서 바제 바발레 제로 자도 먼저로 좀 바세제 공도 바세도 이제 바도 메바셔는 넘게 바스 지제자베 세 자사 티파 저 바바데다게 세면노 바페 먼저 세제 공도 제용서 세가 제 중화 저 바바데다게 세면노 바페 먼저로 좀 바데다게 나리 저 보거리 저 보모 다 제림 본데비 대저 바세도 이제 바도 메바디 세 자사 제니도 이게 저거 여기 준주고 바바데도 하게 되도 말에 바바는 도 또고 오면 나무 방가와다 바람다 연자나 서버너 저다 텐조라다 야다 단가다 야라 대소냐 소비다 대다 om번에 마번에 바람다 자나 서버바스 오마사와소가라 파르시다 다메 나마데 가가나 사망가데서 보버제데 마나요 파르와리 소가 조바 디지베세 자자지 보만도 고몰라발라바시 이겐도 이게 요게 돈주고 레버버티에 되면 마치고 바잖아 세세 바발레 세자도 바저버 더네 셰베네 저바티 저바세 바도 메바바디 손지 저바시 엔지데 고예데 바도 메바라 수바셔 완저로 오만나모 방가바데 아파르마다 엔자나서 서버너 저데데 텐조라데 나가다야라 또 손지 수비데 데도 온번에 마번에 아파르마다 자나서 바라바 오마사와소가로 파르시데 담마데 가가 나마서만가데서 보버제데 마네 바라와라이 소가 용디데 손지 저바자 그치짜기 군바치도 용치 개체도 이제 봐도 매빈 돈도 수요소 오만나모 방가바데 마르마다 엔자나서 바번 서버너 저데 텐조라데 나가다야라 또 손지 소 비다야 데도 온번에 마번에 아파르마다 자나서 바라바 오마사와소가로 파르시다 파르시다 담마데 가가나 사망가데서 보버제데 마나야 바라와라이 소가 용어디 제 소지베 저바도 제저자지 군바지도 용지게 세도 이제 받으면 비 받으면 빈 돈도 수요소 오만나모 방가바다 바람마다 엔자나서 버너 저데 도라데 나가다야라 손녀 속비다야 대도 번에만 봐 대야 타 온번에 마번에 아바람마다 자나서 버러바데 오마사와소가로 파르시다 담마데 가가 나마사망가데서 보버제 마나야 파르와리 소가 용어디 제 소지 샤와 토아도 저자기 군바지도 용지게 세도 이제 받으면 돈도 수소 오모 나모 방가와데 바람마다 엔자나서 버너 저데 텐조라데 단가다야라 손녀 소비데 대야도 번에 마번에 아바람마다 자나서 버러바데 오마사와소가로 파르시다 담마데 가가나 사망가데서 보버제데 마나야 파르와리 소가 용어디 제 소지 저와 토아저 저짜기 군바지도 용어지게 세도 이제 받으면 돈도 수소 오모 나모 방가와데 바람마다 엔자나서 버너 저번에 저번에 텐조라다야 단가다야 알아 손녀 소비다야 대야도 온번에 마번에 아바람마다 자나서 버러바데 Jana soba roba zino ma sawa sugara parishide dhamma ten gangana samangada soba opishade mahana yu parawarayi soga yungo ti je suji yu shiva chwa gajiva tsangi yu kuma jidu yungo ji ge che tu yu shi pata me do su so om namo bhagava de aparamata ayanja nama sabba nama shiva de vate nora daya tana gata yara to sunya sobida teya da om pane pane ma pane aparamata pane jana soba roba zino ma sawa sugara parishide dhamma ten gangana samangada soba opishade mahana yu parawarayi soga我的这书记小娃查这张爱公吧，启动用这个策略就把他们都属说我们那么搞的，把他们大一点的什么那个那就什么那些的那人的当个大家啦，就是你说别的呀，都不能嘛，不能不能。Jana soba roba te om sawa sogara parishita dhamma de gangana samanga de soba parishita mana ya parawara soga yung te te suji chawa tha sacha ju gumba ji de yung ji ge che do je pa de me bin do do su so om namo bhagavate aparamada jana soba no sho te tenzoran da ya ta ga ta ya ra te sunya sobi de ya to pan ma pan aparamata jana soba roba te om sawa sogara parishita dhamma de gangana samanga de soba parishita mana ya parawara soga yung te te suji chawa tha Nyeshatangi Gumaji Yumaji said we bought maybe the one was so Namabanga Aparamata Ayan Sabana Sabana Tenzora Diatanagata to so be there. Teata Umpanema Aparamata Panajana Soba was the Masawasogara Parajada Naman Gangana Samanga Soba Pajademana Parawara Soga Mumati Suji Javatra Kungi Shawa Talk Kungi Luigi Shamani Gumaji Yumaji said we but maybe don't the Su so Omanamo Mangawa the Aparamata Ayan Masabana Ara the Sonia Sobi Diata open Aparamata Panajana Soba Savasagara Parishada Damat Gangana Samangata Soba Pajamana, Parawara Soga, Kumoshi, Sedu, but maybe don't the Yugen Yugen Dunjuna, Seba, T. Cesepale, Celo Jatamanjoro, Celo Nova Manjoro, Omnamo Mangavada Baramata Angel. Sabona Jetenora Nagatara to Sonia Sobi, that open Aparamata Aparamata Panajana Soba was the Masawasogara Parish, the Dama, the Gangana Samanga Soba, the Mana, Parawara, Soga, Kumoshi, Sedu, but maybe don't again Jogo, again Dunju, Nati, Sejena, Tumshosocation, Doshi did no you, Siji did. Not on your shower, Manjaro, not on your Macomba shower, Manjate, Kumodo, Kumoto, she shower, Toja, the shower to Manjaro, Omanamo Mangawat, Aparament. Ainjana Sabano, Jodetoranda, Nagatara, the Sonia Sobi, the Dombanama, Aparamata, Jana Sobaro, Batanoma, Sawasogara Parish, the Dama, the Gangana Samanga, the Soba, Paravara, Soga, Kumola, she gets it, but maybe the one. You can do, you can Dunjuna, you can Dunjuna teach Pim, Bojajo, to Dunju Banjoro. Tan didn't know Thomas and Junker Wakale. Omanamo Magat, Aparamata, and Sabano, Najetanagata. Ara, the Sonia Sobi, the theatre, Umadama, Aparamata, Jana Soba, the Masawasogara Parishita, Namatanga, Samanga, the Soba, the Mana, Paravara. Kumoshi said to Japan, maybe don't you can go again to Juna, Chichipimoja to shed the Jubaton Ratavan Nipashiba, you know. Omo Namo Bangavada Paramata and Sabano Sabano Jetenora Tangata, Sonia Subi, the theatre, Umadama, Aparamata. Aparamata Panajana Soba Robot, the Masawasogara Parish, the Dama, the Gangana Samanga, the Soba Pajademana, Paravari Soga, Kumoshi said to Japan, maybe don't. You can go, you can Dunju and Ati, Some Bangashi, Yuso, Shuanjaro, Omanama Bangavata Paramata and Sabana Sabana the Dorada, the Nangatara, the Sonia Sobi, the Panama, Paramata, Panajana Soba Robot, the Masawasogara Parish, the Dama, the Gangana Samanga, the Soba Pajademana, Paravara Soga. Kumoshi said, "Way about the maybe the again going to Junati, the people Rato, Yuso, Shuan, Joro, Omanama Bangavada, Baramada, and Saban. No Saban, no Shadanaga, the Tenzoranda, Tangata, to Sonia Sobi, the Teatro, Panama, Paramata Panajana, Paramata Panajana, Soba, the Masawasagara Parasha, the Managana Samanga, the Soba, Pajademana, Paravara, Soga, Kumoshi said, "We bought the maybe the way going to Junatella, did to DJ Lato." Near to Simbi, lots of you, lots, such a lot near Bamanjoro. Omanamo Bangavada, Paramata, and Sabanata, Sabana, Jete, Nagata, Nagatara, to Sonia Sopi, that open Panama, Paramata. Abaramada Baranjana Sobarova the Doma Sogara Parisha the Daman and Gangan Samanga the Soba the Mana Paravara Soga Kumashi said to his bottom even though the you can do Unity, Chi teaches Sujishawa Gajisa, Ging, so the Baba Sujitung la Shua, Jero, Sujishin, Sujishan, and Rovan, the La Teso to Sonia to Yinimashi, Omanamo Bangavata, Paramada, and Saban. Saba no je te no randa ya nanga da ara to sonyo so bidaya te ata ompane mana mahapane aparamata jana soba roba te no masawa sogara parishi da dhamma de ganga na samanga de soba pa jade mahana ya parawara isoga konta che don yi shi pa da me bin do de yigen to jona ja bochim bo je ti sha je da lu shi suwa de sha ba do bawa xie ban jero omana bo magawa da aparamata jana sabana na sheba de beten randa ya nanga da ara to sonyo so bidaya Teata, Umpane, Mahapane, Aparamata, Jana Soba Robas, the Masawasogara Parachet, Dama, the Gagana Soba Opachet, Samanga, the Soba Opachet, the Mana, Parawara, Soga, Kumashi said to each part, maybe don't again to go. Again, don't you not Tejisha Bagay, but maybe Sunji teacher called the watch in the show and Jero, Omanama Bangavata, Paramata, and Janasaban. Sabana, show the Tentorana, the Nangadara, the Sunya Supida, the Banama, Baramana, Jana, Sobarabata, the Masawasaka Parasha, the Managana, Samanga, the Soba, the Mana, Baravara, Sasho, Kumotan, the Ketchun, the Tree, Sasho, Cheted and Jero, Sunkish, and Swing Shadow, Dog, Nalo, the Tabachabate, Tunjalana, Metabas, about Sunja and Jero, Omanamo Bangawa, Aparamata, Iron, Saban. No, she didn't go to Tentorana, to Sonia Sobida, Opanaba, Teotea, Ta, Umpanipana, Aparamata, Jana Sobarabas, Omasawa Sokara, Parishi, the Dama, the Gagan, Samanga, the Soba, Mana, Parawara, Soka, Kumashi said to his bottom, don't know. Again to go, again to what you never take, listen, no time was your Majar Omanam Banga, Aparamata, and Sabana, Tentorana, the Sonia Sobida. Ta open aparamata, Jana Sobarabata, the Masawasaka Parashi, the Dama, the Gagana Samanga, the Soba, which the man, Paravaris, Kumashi said to his bottom, maybe not on the Kajapana, Chi, Jambashana. The two sons of what you mentioned, not the Jinus of Kumadej, Bashmaja, Omanamagawada, Baramada, and Janasaban. Sub no show the Nagadara to Sonia Sobida, open Aparamata, Jana Sobarabata, the Masawasaka Parasha, the Namangan, Samanga, the Soba, Mana Paravara is Oga, Kumula, La, Shi, Chito, Noton, the La Chevasha, Japan, Joati, Tombichi, Tato Chevasha, Jero. Omanamo Bangavata, Baramata, Ayana Sabana, Jote, Tendoranda, Nagadara, to Sonia Sobida. Teata, Umpanema, Aparamata, Jana Sobarabata, the Masawasaka Parasha, the Dama, the Gangan, Samanga, the Soba, the Mana, Paravara is the Tate, Penatijabano, Bazi, Tutochi, Tochi, Showa, Lupa, to say to set to get to Shajatavala, Suba, Lambuch, not the Chevashi, Energy Pimbitsen, no one needs to each other, maybe Energy Pimbitsen, no one manis, so Omanamo Bangava, the Aparamata, Ayana Saba, Nojete Tendoranda, the Nagatara, the Sonia Subi, the Omanama, Aparamata, Jana Sobarabas, Omasawa, Sogara Parish, the Dama, the Gangan, Samanga, the Soba, the Mana, Paravara is Ogamanta, the Rinpoche, Pumbo, Rage about Razo, Peter, Jambashaba, Tis, Energy Permission, and Ruan, he just said to his bottom, don't this energy permission and Ruan, Maniso, the Omanamangavata, Baramata, Ayana Sabana, Sabana, Shetin, good Tendoranda, Nagata, Araha, the Sonia Sobi, the open Aparamata, Jana Soba Robats, the Omasawa Sokara, Parishi, the Dama, the Gagan, Samanga, the Soba, the Mana, Paravara, so the Tate, Pena Jazo Chimbo, Pena Jazo Chimbo, Chasa, Yusa, Queen, Tipare, Reni, Duani, you said to your bottom, maybe the one days and what permission on Duan, so Omanamo Bangava, the Aparamat. Ayana Sabano, the Nagata, Nagata, Arata, Sonia Sobida, the Adam Bariman. Aparamata, Jana Soba Robot, and Omasawa Sokara, Parishi, the Dama, the Gangana, Samanga, the Soba, the Mana, Paravara, Soga, Kedanimakua. You come, she said to each part, maybe you can do, you can do, the Chevasha, Javati, Shuchi, Suji, Shitonjeta, Tejishabala, Shwashiba, Chevashiba, you know, Omanamo Bangawa. aparamata ayanjana sabana shate nagade tenoranda nagada arata sunya so bidai te ata ompane pane mapane aparamata pane jana sobara wazano sawasogara parashita dhamma ngana samanga soba pashade mana ya parawara isoga yimbeto je suju daba mai senge yimbeto don ye che enje wa chujin ju bana yimbeto je dana traba ja 此这多几数据用到吧，没生给此这多的，你之前就逐渐就把那此这多几张的抓把这这边多几数据用到吧，没生给这边多的，你之前就逐渐就把那这边多几张的抓把这整体解决数据用到吧，没生给整体多的，你之前就逐渐就把那整体多几张的抓把这说的多几数据用到吧，没生给说的多的，你之前就逐渐就把 so te to je dana chapa je ba shira to je su ju da ba mai seng ge shira to do ye je je ju ju ba na shira to je dana chapa jer om nam ba ga ba abarma da ayen jan sab na no je te ten zora da ya na ga da ara to sunya so bidai te ya ta om pan ban ma pan abarma da pan jana so ba ro ba je de om sa so ga ra parishi da na ma da ga na samanga de so ba ba je Madaya parawara yi soha, choden de jishi dege ji kasanen joba jen joba do toche do denbe ko de do la do lama ye do tsa do jibin ji de yen choden de ji sumba langi ba de do baba se do yi ba de me ba she sha tewa chi min do zu so jaga je pe chta pene so ba ton lo tsa wa pa sa ni ma tra chi jowa go lo tsa wa pa sa ni ma tra sa chi jin do.
So Geshe just pointing to the fact of the translator of this was known as Lotsawa Peltsik. Lotsawa Peltsik.
Tene Lotsawa Pasa Nyamacha Seate, Tene Trapanos Sringazo Unity Jungiares.
Japa Namsum. So Geshe just explaining that this translator Peltsik, he was known as kind of one of the three famous ones. The three famous ones.
Jagal Tene Sunjigata, Pageta Loma Tap, Tangine Pagetatul Roke, Padeda Trapa, Trapachin was.
And so this name, the famed or the renowned, is something that is not used lightly. So for example, we call one of the most important panditas of ancient India, Chandra Kirti, right? Famous moon. So it's quite a high title. And so why was Chandra Kirti known as a famous moon or renowned moon? It's because on the basis of his text, the Madhyamakavatara, or entering the middle way, the Buddha's final intent was able to be clarified. So, actually, what happened was, of course, Chandrakirti, being a holy being, had clairvoyance, and he saw that perhaps some of these profound treatises, like his own compositions, and also some of the profound sutras, need to be translated into Tibetan, but there might not be those who are qualified to translate it. So, he said that in the future, I will be reborn as a Tibetan translator named Famous Sun. And so Famous Sun is kind of the epithet we use to refer to Peltsik. So he's often called Peltsik Nima Dragpa. Peltsik, Famous Sun.
And this was that day, when you are put the Niji Pel Jataware, and the top of the Lojo to Pake, Tata, Tembochunga Maiza, Digasha Shimanda Wachilla, and Jiluzo Tapa, somebody.
And then there are some prophecies that say, so okay, you have Chandrakirti, who kind of clarified the Buddha's intent, and then you had Peltsik Nimachakpa, who would translate those teachings. But even if those teachings are translated, there would need to be somebody who was able to explain them. And so some prophecies say that there was a third incarnation who was known as Je Lotsang Dragpa, one of the names of Lama Tsongkhapa.
Oh, Lama Tsongkhapa, Tani Pel Pen, and Tumba to Tenjuni, but in Yerikin, Mandus, Takoroto, Tata, Chipandoke, Tata was Abachi.
And so, sort of a new emphasis that Tsongkhapa outlined, right, or we could say outlined, highlighted, that's a better word, highlighted, was the inseparability of emptiness and dependent arising, right? And this is kind of a cornerstone of what he taught. So he kind of clarified newly the fact that emptiness and dependent arising, like the palm and the top surface of the hand, they must always go together. Otherwise, one cannot come to a final understanding. So this was a very important sort of new emphasis.
tumba 가세 손으로 또는 땡주 주 요요도야 땡주 가세 초아체는도나 tum바를 지 주소 도야 다 왔더니지야.
And he clarified in this view that the more clearly one comprehends emptiness, naturally that will be an assist to better comprehending dependent arising. And the more clearly that one understands dependent arising, that will be an assist to better understanding emptiness. So they reinforce each other.
jimala repeat tunie tupi niji she sekindo as niji to tunie nyamboten gawachine mepa ta pagen royaji.
And also worth mentioning here the words of the great saint Lord Milarepa, who said that emptiness and compassion are inseparable. With greater understanding of emptiness, compassion only increases, said Milarepa.
다 이나 이시고 돈바서 그런 데서 자도든 담마라 뭐지 요 알테네 다테 하면 그런 메도 드나다 와서도 그래.
So different holy beings, of course, have different modes of explanation and emphases in terms of these topics. But Geshe said you should see those different viewpoints as beautifully different colored flowers in the same garden. That's how we should view those differences. Yeah, and so Geshe said he started sort of on this vein of explanation, just remembering why the translator of this Amitayus Sutra, who is known as Paltseg, is also known as Paltseg Nima Chakpa, Paltseg, famous son, S-U-N.
노징안주 버게 다세라 데비칼 샤테 데비칼 튜누 요아레스 바타 노스 줄라 테네 타가 버게 로주 타시마 줄라 타시마 지로이스.
And so then also there are kind of prayers of dedication that are recited at Geshe's monastery of Sera sometimes that says, may I become like the three famous ones. So that's the three that have Dragpa attached to their name. Dawa Dragpa, Chandrakirti, Paltseg Nima Dragpa, the translator Paltseg, and Losang Dragpa, Lama Tsongkhapa. So in this way we had, Geshe said, a very long preliminary practice today. So let us now turn to our discussion of Dza Patrul Rinpoche's words of my perfect teacher. And also Geshe said that because of the text that we're doing, we've been reciting the 7-line prayer and mantra to Guru Rinpoche, and Geshe said he himself has recited countless times the mantra Om Ahum Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hung. It's one of the mantras he recites the most. So Geshe actually, earlier in his life, he experienced terrible sickness. And at the time that he was experiencing this sickness, he really put his faith and recited many of the Vajra Guru mantra, the Om Ahum Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hung. And that really showed him that this is something that he should continue to recite regularly throughout his life.
Yeah.
And so Geshe said that whenever he recites the 7-line prayer and the mantra of Guru Rinpoche, he remembers there's a special room for the Yidam of Seraje, who is known as Tamjan Yangsang, most secret Hayagriva. And in the room where Hayagriva's statue is, there's also a very beautiful statue of Guru Rinpoche. And whenever Geshe recites Om Ahum Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hung, in his mind he naturally recalls this beautiful statue of Guru Rinpoche. So Geshe also wants to relate a story about this. So especially in earlier years, there was a lot of sectarianism between the various traditions. And so, connected with that, Drepung and Ganden and the other college of Sera, they would say that externally the monks of Seraje appear to be Gelugpas, but actually secretly they are really Nyingmapas.
다 시스터는 야롬버체 예도 단지세야데 제레지 포게 데스라비노바 가사 생지 유도를 이니 메지 교회에서
And so how this, this arose because of their relying on Yangzang Tamjin, most secret Hayagriva, as the Yidam, right? And he's rooted in the Nyingma tradition. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he started to clarify in many teachings that, in fact, most secret Hayagriva is the wrathful manifestation of Chenrezi or Avalokiteshvara, and that during these times, his practice is something absolutely necessary. And after His Holiness said this, then the other monasteries, they were not like, I guess, teasing the monks of Serajay as much. And Geshe really feels that, as the years have gone on, people have become more open-minded, right? And sectarianism has become less pronounced because of that. So Geshe said that, we're doing the commentaries of both the Tsedo, the Long Life Sutra, and Words of My Perfect Teacher. But since the transmission took up so much time, we'll continue with the explanation of the Long Life Sutra next class, but we will go directly to Words of My Perfect Teacher now. Samsam nganso kare yung sigire. So Geshe said also, as we go through the next part of the text, there's some heavy information, and some of that might be not the easiest to hear, but this is very useful information that is going to help us. So try to approach it with that kind of mind. Yes, nganso kawayere.
Dachaga temba tembi chung.
Dachagi temba chuparwa. Dire. Chod Yeah, so we left last time on page 13 of the Padmakara edition, where it says, the Dharma is nobody's property, it belongs to whoever has the most endeavor. So we're continuing from there.
Dachaga tembi chung chi jere shada lila shai kovo chite ndamachi do to dribu do tung zupatung kali medung de chungwa de lila chache zewo tung tabaso kawa jachagi gone chi shiba yembi mezu pudi sonyo gane na chata tuge ba de tongji zal shiba tar denye chembi kaze chachong toji chedo se de nyegi.
The Buddha himself obtained the teachings at the price of hundreds of hardships. To obtain a single 4-line verse, he gouged holes in his own flesh to serve as offering lamps, filling them with oil and planting them in thousands of burning wicks. He leapt into flaming pits and drove 1,000 iron nails into his body. Even if you have to face blazing infernos or sharp razor blades, search for the Dharma until you die.
다 치치 저래게 된다라요. 되니 소리도야 되니 그다 손지가 로지를 뭐 요아래. 그래서 대질 따와 이나이 다 되니 손노도는 다 지대냐 보고 그래.
So there are many stories actually from before the Buddha became enlightened from his previous lives, where he was willing to offer his life, his body, even just to receive one verse of Dharma. And so as we hear these, what this should do is bring forth a mind in ourselves, right, that is striving towards the Dharma.
대다 가르치게 요르서는 가르스 대녀비도 보고 요아래. 서로와 거기에 빠진다고 남문에 대해서 용거리 되니까 디딜 빠체 되지가 다 치를 빠체 시험치바 다 템복 그래.
So we need to have this mind of striving towards the Dharma, because what will happen is, of course, as we go through our life of practice, from time to time, we're going to experience obstacles, right? But if we have this mind of striving towards the Dharma, we will be able to clear those obstacles. Think about the beings of this world and how day and night they toil, sometimes at very difficult tasks, trying to achieve some kind of temporary worldly happiness, right? But our effort that we're bringing forth is not like that. our effort of the Dharma is aimed towards lasting happiness.
다 니때 그 보게 내가 티깔에 던지 지야할 텐데 대신 요도 많이 사 그 태속을 지지래 맞아 땡보지면 되고.
And with the worldly endeavors that we toil so hard to be successful in, whether or not those are going to truly bring happiness or not, there's always a doubt. We can never be sure of how things are going to work out.
다 가서 내가 때고 니만 보게 가이빙원에 내가 제가 얘는 되고 야바도 코타 내가 지래 마도 태속을 요.
But with Dharma, right, all the effort that we put into Dharma from day to day, it's not ephemeral like that. We can have certainty that that Dharma is going to eventually be able to bring forth a result of happiness.
다 부셔봐도 니지도 제와도 대지 세도 쳇도 그만 리반노지 맞아봐도 손솔 다 깔깔대지 용식이 야 용거로 왔어.
As we cultivate these positive qualities like love, compassion, and patience, for example, of course, until they're mixed with our mind stream like milk mixed together with water, we're going to encounter some difficulties in trying to bring them forth. Yes, this is true.
다 이나요 이내로도 시소나 다 가서 폴리자와 노지 세도 시게 되니 쯤문전에 주저로 하시래. 맞습니다.
But once we become skilled at bringing forth these positive mental qualities, love, compassion, patience, and so forth, then it almost becomes something that's entertaining to watch. How our mind is actually kind of like a football match between the positive mental qualities we try to arise and the negative or unwholesome states of mind.
뚜발로 좀 마셔봐 이나요 단단히 리도 셀 보게 하고 살아와 마음에 노지다 코로페도 여기 내지래.
And so even before realization is brought forth, right? Because it might be a while until we get realization. The body and mind that are imbued with these positive qualities, they'll immediately start to experience benefit.
당길라야 되는 유아지 이나요 다 세게 제모제도 시소나시에도 예텔라 코로포게 제모제는 로게는 유아지 가디기나래. 이나 좀 야보다나.
And earlier we mentioned about the four elements within the body. If we're able to have this kind of attitude of observation in our practice, like I'm watching a match between these unwholesome negative states of mind and the positive mental qualities, and we can sit back and relax, actually those elements will be undisturbed, will always be in balance, will be able to remain calm.
유아지 참은 요바서 근데 처음에 비 내서 주줄라 되는 거야. 단단히 가서 초여비 내서 지자 가디나.
Why is this? Because imbalances in the elements are related to our neuroses of kind of constantly being trapped thinking about things that are not beneficial. Once we release that, the elements come into balance. So we have to know how to make practice a happy, joyful thing. Then true happiness will be able to arise. And once we develop that taste of happiness that comes through practice, we'll be able to maintain a level of happiness no matter who we are sharing a space with, or whether we are completely on our own. So this is actually a big piece of advice from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He shared it particularly in a teaching on the four foundations of mindfulness, which is that we should see this as like a game, right? Observing these qualities and unwholesome thoughts within the mind. And then we can actually proceed with the practice happily. When we have this kind of mindset of the game, it also makes us more easily able to observe what kind of thoughts are coming in the mind. When we think of them of them as embodied beings, right, like players on the field, how does anger operate? What is anger's game strategy? How does patience operate? What is patience's game strategy? Movie And so His Holiness also previously, when people would ask him, like, what do you like to do in your spare time, he would sometimes watch television and things like that. But as His Holiness kind of continued on in years, when this question came up again, he says, previously previously it was maybe a little bit interesting to watch those things, but now I find it more interesting, far more interesting to watch the game between the positive and unwholesome qualities within the mind.
당가 어떤 저기 왔어. 셔 됐어. 셔 초쪽에 열라. 노시 이완은 거의 전원 토제지 자와 등화 토제진 유그 이대 저서다.
Actually, it's teasing me a lot today. I was saying, you probably were wondering why I was laughing during the transmission of the Amitayus Sutra. That's because Geshe's like, don't fall asleep, Ngodrup. That's why I was laughing, in case you were wondering. The tendency of consciousness to get engrossed in the objects of the six senses is the root of all samsara's hallucinations and the source of all suffering. So we have these six kind of sense powers, and these give rise to six consciousnesses, right? And if these six are always kind of finding themselves attracted or going out towards distractions, afflicted distractions, and so forth. Because the appearances that arise on contact with these sense objects give rise to appearances related to ignorance, actually, if we're not careful and the senses are always going outwards, then confusion increases. And so ourselves, but also certain types of foe destroyers, and even earlier career, I like to call them earlier career bodhisattvas, all of us, as long as ignorance is not defeated, actually our sense consciousnesses can be considered to be mistaken, completely mistaken. We cannot get rid of a mistaken appearance that arises together with an object completely. We can't remove that veil of that appearance of confusion completely until there is a direct realization of emptiness. Okay, so then maybe there's an objection. Well, then does that mean that if everything that we're perceiving has an aspect of a mistaken appearance, that all of the things that we do in relation to those perceptions are completely mistaken? There's a caveat here. This is not the case. So, because this, if we look at it, right, even positive qualities like love, compassion, bodhicitta, these are arising together with, connected with mistaken appearances, right, until that direct realization of emptiness happens. But that doesn't mean that they're bad things, right? They are still incredibly positive minds. And so the reason is because when we're developing love, compassion, bodhicitta, the mind is apprehending an object that is completely positive. Because of the overwhelmingly positive aspect of that particular object, the mistaken appearance that is arising together with it cannot really, it's not really causing any problems. So it's kind of the mode of apprehension that has that mistaken appearance, but when we talk about the we can't say that this is always means that everything is negative, because when one is apprehending a primarily positive object, that's a good thing, right? So, but with attachment, anger, and pride, ignorance, grasping at the self, if these are the objects that are kind of being held in the mind, not only is that appearance mistaken, but also we can say the apprehension, the resting on the object is mistaken, right? Because those objects are unwholesome.
다 개체 못 와서 와서 다 된다 초주게 다 노아 뭐 용기가 있다 된 노징아로선 좀 줘. 저번에 디슈를 다 넣어서나.
Yeah.
되는 간절 노아 뭐 용기가.
So these objects are contacting the six senses, and then the senses are apprehending those certain objects, and because along with that there is a mistaken appearance, then one can fall into mistakes.
나로서 단다 다디니까 미 가왔다와 이나요 노아지도 용기가 알았어. 버게지 노아지.
Nangwadi kareres lavna yaboyere gen konso. Rangshingi drubagi nangwade. So I said to guys, sorry, sometimes Ngodrup's a bit of an interlocutor, or maybe just rude, but I said, maybe it's good if we clarify what that appearance is that's arising that we're talking about, because like I think sometimes we think like we see everybody every week and everyone knows, but maybe some folks don't know, right? So this, the appearance, the mistaken appearance that's arising together with that object being apprehended that Geshe was talking about, this is the appearance of inherent existence or true existence, right? And Geshe said this kind of very specific way of talking about that mistaken appearance as being inherent existence, you find this only really in the Prasangika presentation. Even in the other Majjhimika school, in the Sautantrikas, you won't find this presentation. So a first step towards dealing with this is when we look at an object, right, we understand that together, mixed with our apprehension of that object, is this mistaken appearance. So what we can think is, the way that these things are appearing to me right now is not reliable. Things do not necessarily exist in the way that we appear. In the way that they appear. And just thinking like that, right, is already kind of putting us in a direction of being able to understand. So if we think of a prime minister or a president, depending on the country where you're living, when we think of them, like when we bring that to our mind, it seems like there's a pinpointable, truly existent PM or president right there, isn't it? But what we have to realize is that them being the PM or the president, this is coming from our mode of apprehension of them as an object, and also the labeling that we are putting on them with our mind. There is nothing inherently from his or her side of that person that makes them inherently the PM or the president. Think about it. If he or she were inherently the PM or the president, if this was an innate quality, right from the moment that they came out of their mother's tummy, from when they were a very small child, they would have had to be that president or that prime minister. And this also we'll see this kind of reasoning used in some of the Chittamandran or mind-only reasonings, and this really helps us to get a clearer picture of things. Michike, yeah. When we meet somebody who we think is truly awful, we think this is a completely horrible person, right? This is how they are perceiving and how we are kind of imposing those qualities onto them. This doesn't exist completely from their side. If that person was 100% as awful as we see in that moment, well, what if if that was really their true kind of nature, their quality? Well, what if that person was your friend last year, right? It often happens that the person who was our friend last year is our enemy this year. So really, we see that they're not enemy from their own side. Yeah, so just using kind of these basic reasonings, actually, we can come to a much greater clarity of understanding how things really are. The taste on
던지지 이제 가디나 게 저기도 매지가 파다 매지가 치다가 해서 소설.
Yeah. And so this also relates to what was shared last time with the fact of when we're looking at a situation just on the practical level, one eye is looking at what's happening outwards, but also one eye should be directed internally to ourselves, to what's happening.
나도 녀leg 신다고 쪼대 중보대로 왔어. 중보서라 소설 시다야지 그거 알았어.
Because the essence of practice is a fundamental honesty. And a fundamental honesty means to be able to completely look at our part in each situation. Oh.
Yeah.
So that's a very important point. Whether one is really practicing or not, we can say that this is really related to whether one is being honest with oneself or not.
나와 달라 잡여다 녜베세 나 달라 잡이 병화 메도다 제로라 잡이 냐모 짜지 레레제라 잡이 롱본도다 신와 따거동.
So this is how the moth dies in the lamp flame, because its visual consciousness is attracted to forms. How the stag is killed by the hunter, because its hearing draws it to sound. How bees are swallowed by carnivorous plants, seduced by their smell. How fish are caught with bait, their sense of taste lured by its flavor. How elephants drown in the swamp because they love the physical feeling of mud. So what kind of beautiful evocative examples, and also if we think about them in a certain way, we can see that these examples are actually illustrating the faults of attachment, right, to these experiences. So the moth, the poor thing, it's really seeking happiness, and it seeks that happiness in light and warmth, but its attachment to that light and warmth, if it goes into the candle flame, can be the very thing that kills it. How the stag is killed by the hunter, that this example came earlier, right? Hearing a very pleasant sound can be transfixed by music. It becomes so transfixed, making it vulnerable to being killed. And also bees, Geshe said, or other insects, there's a smell of these carnivorous plants, like a Venus flytrap, right? They fall into those. How fish are caught with bait and so forth. Yeah, so the fisherman puts just a little tiny tasty morsel on its hook, on his or her hook, and based on that, then the fish loses its life. Yeah. So the elephants, right, during the heat, right, they cool themselves with cool mud or with wet sand, and because of their attachment to that pleasant feeling of coolness, sometimes they walk into a very deep swamp or into quicksand, and because of the weight of their body, right, they're unable to get out, and sometimes they can lose their lives. So we think about these examples and we think, well, these poor animal beings, right, they didn't know any better. But this should also cause us to reflect on ourselves, on our own life. And do we really know better? Koidom, right. Domja. Domgija dira. Yeah. Ale. Ale, so if we look at our own activities, if we look at 24 hours of our time, how do we spend that? We can see that we are in some ways like that elephant, right? We are stuck in the muck of this swamp of samsara. And that's because we are just so habituated to samsara because of the force of that habituation, it's sticky like the mud, right? It keeps sucking us in.
배 콜로 대주 같은 로비 피가 다니 대화가 놀아 아기치라 자서 대화 되노라 다 가디 이나라 거의 오버 마주 되니 다 타와지쇼.
So, there's a great adept of the Chakrasamvara Tantra known as Luipapada, and there's a commentary to Luipapada's system by Akusherab Gyatso, and it gives a very important explanation.
가디이나 거의 오버서네 마데스.
Don't remain the servant of samsara. Liberate yourself from that subjugation.
거의 마주 돈이서 사주하레스. 거의 오버.
Yeah. So Geshe is quoting exactly as it appears in the text, but the essence is do not remain a servant of that. Liberate yourself.
와 다원은 아주 내가 가르쳐가래서나 예용. 뭐서 바자지 지제바. 마고바 녀무진 더서와 다다 뚜빠제 제 유도 쇼와 스모드다 치천에 고저 공기 가서용 공기대.
So, next, the thing to do. In the same way, whenever you are listening to the Dharma, teaching, meditating, or practicing, it is important not to follow tendencies from the past, not to entertain emotions about the future, and not to let your present thoughts get distracted by anything around you.
다 론데 집을 찾아봐 이런 DP 되겠네서 나만아 주소는 되게 자기 세계선은 단거 고마데.
So it's saying, like, look at our own tendencies, even just the things that sort of happened to you this year, thinking about them again and again and how nervous or stressed that makes us. So don't remain completely in the cycle of those thoughts about what has already happened. Yeah, these past moments, they are like a rainbow that has already faded in the sky through the sun's light rays. So don't remain transfixed. Yeah, and also, just like not being able to be in the present, but obsessing in the future, thinking about all those years in the future plans, what we're going to do and so forth, this can also be very unbeneficial. And so because of these sense experiences, because of these worries about past and future, the mind is always going outward to distraction, right? That's the point that's being made here. So because that's not going to be useful to you, then instead put your mind's attention on what is useful and wholesome.
Geshe Rinpoche ji me yichi jima ji jijo tenan jogun daraso tite chilen duge maniwa cheche ronsho toka nyajanda sombito de mamba ndendoshi jijo tenan noche chameso chimo shalon duge maniwa ronji shaja molo tawana deji maro isi.
Yeah. So I'll just read the first verse from Gyaltse Rinpoche, Geshe said, and then we will continue to others next class. Your past joys and sorrows are like drawings on water. No trace of them remains. Don't run after them. But should they come to mind, reflect on how success and failure come and go. Is there anything you can trust besides Dharma Mani reciters? So whenever your mind is completely always going to these outside objects, it's really kind of helpful to remember, right, the faults of samsara. However kind of wealthy or accomplished one becomes within samsara, like that doesn't have any essence. That's not going to be something lasting. Those famous people have to experience it. All of those wealthy people have to experience it. When they come to the end of their lifespan, they will have to experience that suffering and go on to the next life. That's one of the main faults of samsara, and the irony here is that actually if we recollect that fault of samsara, it's actually going to help us to relax. It will actually help us to relax.
그래 가디 이나기 뭐야.
When can we have that freedom, that lasting happiness, being happy all the time? When one is unbound from karma and affliction. And out of those two, karma and affliction, karma is not the main one, it is the afflictions.
동반 얘기에서도 또 할레베 니빠 침모 찾아서나 레콜 레카서야 가기만 되와. 레nga 자타 못하 뭐 사야 뭐 하르데.
Once the direct realization of emptiness is achieved, then those previously accumulated karmas, they really won't have a space within to function. So, so all of that karma will be purified.
레nga 야 멤버십 발라 니빠티와 멤버십 고 사회나 보지 와. 델 쳇도 리그 야. 쳇도 리 대차 레카시 그 야. 대차 야보선 단자 마리파.
So why is this the case? Well, it's because the unwholesome karma, the negative karma, they are like seeds in our continuum. And the seeds, they need water and a fertilizer to be able to sprout those negative seeds into the results. And so this water and fertilizer are minds like attachment, anger, and so forth. These minds are rooted in ignorance. So when one has the direct realization of emptiness, this completely disempowers ignorance, and then those seeds don't have any means of sprouting into negative experiences.
So
this is almost in a way entertaining to watch, because we see, like, as we trace back from the teaching to the previous Shabdas, everything kind of lines up and relates to each other. So in that way, we will conclude the session. Let us do the concluding prayers, and afterwards, after the dedication, if you have things you have to do today, of course, feel free to do so. But if you'd like to stick around for question and answer, you're welcome. So we'll go quickly with the prayers. Jangju Zenju Rinpoche Maje Panam Jeju Ji Jeba Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondo Bewa Sho Tongni Tawa Rinpoche Maje Panam Jeju Ji Jewa Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondo Bewa Sho Jambel Bao Jidar Kyamba Tang Kundu Zambo Deyan Dejin Deda Kungi Jesu Dalo Jir Gewa Dida Tanje Radungo Dizu Shebe Gyawa Tanjegi Ngowa Gala Chodo Ngaba De Dagi Gewi Sawa Dikun Kya Zambo Joji Radungo Wagi. Through the power of the merits of both myself and others, may all that is unwholesome, evil thoughts, evil actions, may these be completely cleared away. Through the power of these merits, may all 6 types of beings within samsara transform their minds. May they always be able to give rise to thoughts of kindness. May all that I am striving towards both myself and others be perfectly attained without obstacles. May we be able to proceed with happy bodies and with healthy bodies and happy minds. May our study and practice of the Dharma be like the waxing moon, increasing slowly from the first day to the 15th when it is full. So we'll pause there. So if there aren't too many questions, Geshe will tell a story. If there are questions, Geshe won't tell the story. It was very blunt.
I have a question. I hate to mess up the story, but this is Marjorie.
Yes, no, go ahead. I think that's Marjorie.
I have a question about the Amitayus Long Life Sutra and the practicing of it. Can Geshe talk about if that also helps remove physical obstacles? Because I know living a long life gives you more time to practice the Dharma, but for anyone who's had elderly relatives, for example, my father's lived to be 92, and of course, it gets very difficult physically towards the end when you live a long life. And I'm already feeling it, so I wonder if Geshe would talk about that.
Dene gendi nganzo di tsedo di gi nanglo la ya roa dene di nyamlen chene nganzo tsering chik togires yene yang tsegi barche me paso togires karinsena chok chikla tsering bo yabo tsigire dua yene morangi pala samlo thana ko gubshu go ni bardu des so anilo tama chuden zo hale pe kale kapo roa tsele ga subogi kange sengi kange mambo yores chetsang hale pe tuturimpo yena chatsama yabo yores di dende menduas do di kyoryola tene yang nganso tsegi barche me jogi dusa. Yeah, barche sena lo chambo kapola rwa sem dang supo gi kange den so rwa.
Yeah, that karina konjurun relate so manu yabo chal pedo yarwas.
Yeah, so Geshe said definitely through the recitation of the sutra, like the obstacles that you mentioned coming in old age, right? This should act to clear those away as well. Like ultimately, the realization of this sutra is that things will kind of go exactly according to how one wishes. So not just a long life, but a good life in that way. And in the commentary of the sutra too, right, it talks about the benefits not being just the longevity of this life, but a tremendously powerful purification, even able to purify possible karma that may have been accumulated that would lead somebody to the lower realms, for example. In the commentary, when it talks about the benefits of the sutra, it says that the recitation of the sutra is powerful enough even to purify the 5 uninterrupted karmas, right? So patricide, matricide, and so forth. It's so powerful it can clear away even that negative karma. So Geshe said also, just connected with Marjorie's question about people facing a lot of difficulties later in their life, right? That's very true. But each person is different too, right? So like somebody may be in a lot of difficulties in their life, but based upon having friends and family that help them, they may be able to bring forth positive minds. Whereas if they didn't have those additional years, right, something that may have ripened that would take them to a future lifetime, which would be even more difficult suffering than that suffering of old age. So that's something to think about as well, right? So like the future destinies of in future lifetimes that can be determined by karma, some of them can be quite intense, far more intense of old age, right? Like the text will go through some of those, and some of the names are even scary. But sometimes, right, if a person can stay longer, will be able to do something to put their mind in a positive direction, right? So even though old age can be something very difficult, right? All of samsara, it can be quite difficult. And the future is also uncertain. So even the difficulty of old age, it can be relatively a good time to do positive things.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, Marjorie.
미미다 노치자 가서 시와 가서도 되니 길에는 되니 지나 가제 그게 대토나 매일 와야 버티 배제 또 토나 계속 침으로 와야 오지 좀 뭐.
Yeah, so Geshe realizes there are some exceptions depending on people's health, but generally, like, the longer we can stay, even if our body is pretty, old and experiencing difficulties, if the mind is still there, we can develop our mind to things that are positive, and we can prepare for what's coming next in terms of the next lifetime. So it's for that reason that longevity is seen as favorable.
소시 아버지는 니마치를 이나요 시와지마 시와야 벌레도 하고 내서 도야 다때 할래가 기내서 왔어.
It's really amazing because even with just one day left on earth, if we bring forth the right kind of positive minds and karma, we can ensure ourselves a good future rebirth, right? That's how powerful that time can be. So actually also this is one of the benefits, right, of thinking about past and future lifetimes. It makes us want to seize every moment, doesn't it? So any other questions?
Yes, we have several coming in through social media.
Okay, go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
Okay, so first one, Katya is asking, as far as I know in this sutra, it said that if one writes it down, he will always reincarnate as male. Can Geshe-la comment on this?
Yeah. I was thinking someone might notice that. Yeah. Nanso dogi nanglo la ya roachik, nanso dodi china nanso pume kewa lengo mares nanso kaji ne pu ke tugire duas di kareche sonsa.
말다 대 코로 사자도 소설류스도 가와요메 잡아지래스. 아까 디딜로 코로도 니카텔라.
Yeah.
어따야 분야 벌는데 시원 대바더니 주주이나.
Yeah. So Geshe said that this is probably related to the time and the place. Of course, these texts are very ancient, and the time and the place and the opportunities and the kind of lives women would have had, which maybe would not be so desirable. But Geshe thinks that in our time and age, right, when women have more facility, then, don't think about that as a benefit of writing this sutra. Think about it as like, if you think a female rebirth is more favorable and something that's good for you, then think about it as, it can accomplish that. So think about it that way.
진짜 조명로지노라 요바스. 다 저렇게 들이 소자치 뭐 사사이사 단단면로 잔냐라. 때 대가로를 벌어지는가 셔 손지 세제 우주 손지 마도 봐도 보면 롱게 되라. 같이 이해서 어떻게 알아봤어.
So, like, there's different examples that we can take in the scriptures too. So if you think about the example of Tara, in contrast, despite what other people were telling her, she said that dedicated all of her merits and so forth of practice, saying that I'm going to be reborn again and again in female form until I can liberate all beings. So there's also that example to follow. So you will find in the sutra sometimes those references, but just keep in mind that's a very specific context of a place and time, and that these sutras are very ancient. So Geshe would say don't take it so literally. So also, it's important to understand, which of the teachings are considered higher. And so in the presentation of Sutra and Tantra, we consider Tantra to be higher, and then specifically within Tantra, we consider Anuttara Yoga, or highest Yoga Tantra, to be sort of the highest within those. Yeah. And in the Tantras it states very clearly, particularly in the teachings on Anuttara Yoga, highest Yoga Tantra, that based upon working with the subtle body, the winds and the drops and so forth, a man or a woman can, in one body, in one lifetime, achieve the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood. So from this point of view, it's complete equality. So Geshe would say, look at that. Look at the highest exposition of the Buddha's teachings in the Anuttara Yoga Tantra and what it is saying there. So I think,
yeah,
yeah. So Geshe said, that's the way to think, because in the sutras from time to time you will find statements like that. So that's what he would advise. You can reason back with the sutra. It's like, okay, you're saying this, but actually there's also this. So think about it like that. Yeah. Maybe we could say that women are more important, because in the root vows of Tantra, it says that one of a downfall is to denigrate women. It doesn't say that there's a downfall from denigrating men. So then maybe women are higher. Geshe said, if you think about it that way, right? Yeah. So there's like, if you're talking about scriptural reasoning, yes, okay, the sutra is saying this, but elsewhere in the scriptures there's also this. So there you go. So that's why it's important, right, to understand Dharma holistically, right, to understand different scriptures and things. So if you're reciting the sutra, just like if you want to be reborn as a man, then you can dedicate to being reborn as a man. If you want to be reborn as a woman, dedicate to being reborn as a woman.
Great. The next question is more of a request. Could Geshe perform the oral transmission of the mantra and 7-line prayer of Guru Rinpoche?
Di maumba nganso di Guru Rinpoche gi munlam di thang nak di lungnang tugirebesa. Yes, he can. We'll check on a time, but yes, he is able to give that.
Wonderful. The next question from David. Thanks so much for the beautiful teachings, Geshe. Could you please talk a little bit about the Rime non-sectarian movement in Tibetan Buddhism and how Patrul Rinpoche engaged at this perspective?
Nganso di pepe nangsho gi nangola risu mepa Rime gi tawa chik yores di karechene kelchambores ane Patrul Rinpoche Rime dangjawa kandes chik res gidu.
Mimita Rime dangjawa sena karse karta. Rime se ade. Mimita Rime sena ta Rime kachamo kandes res Rime choa ji yoba yina ta shuri ge choa to pe petla ji.
So Geshe would say, if you were to ask firstly, why is Rime important or significant, it's because based on this view of Rime, of non-sectarianism, we can defeat the mistaken view of sectarianism. And it's through seeing that benefit, right, as an antidote to sectarianism, that His Holiness the Dalai Lama and many other lamas sort of practiced in a Rime way. And so also we need to understand that non-sectarian doesn't mean that you kind of have a mishmash of everything together. It means that you practice different things in their own context as each stream. But with teachings on the stages of the path, like this one, Words of My Perfect Teacher, and others, Geshe said that this issue of keeping like the streams of Dharma, it's actually not really that significant, because in fact the essential teachings are all the same. They might be using different quotes and reasonings to bring the point home, but they're all kind of driving at the same thing. But when, especially in a tantric context, right, if we're doing a tantric sadhana, for example, you wouldn't want to kind of mix all the lineage sadhanas together, right? Because that could actually create obstacles. What you want to do is practice, if you're practicing sadhanas of different traditions, just practice the sadhana within its particular context, with its kind of lineage instructions. Maintain its integrity in that way. So as it relates to this text, you just see that Patrul Rinpoche is not saying this lineage is better than that one or this is superior to that one, and in that way that's the expression of Rime as it is in this text actually. So we just see Rime generally as an antidote to sectarian attitudes and prejudices. That's how Geshe understands it. Yeah, so just a brief touching on that topic. I think we have another question. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, B.
It's more follow-up to what you have just answered. Thank you, Geshe, for clarifying that Rime is more of not having this sectarian attitude of thinking that my lineage is the best lineage. So just to confirm, between lineages or among lineages, there are obviously some contradiction in terms of philosophy, in mostly in relating to the view. That kind of contradiction has no Rime per se, right? It is what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I got it. Nganso dene gendi Rime sena churi mepe gi tawadi treshi gabne ko pendo chembo shuswa roa churi mepa sena churi mepa gi nyambo Rime re duas yine anedi sena ngarangi chuluk yaksheres jenda denso yapo mendus ki samso re duas roa di mepa soegi che di yapo chikche yine nganso chuluk chugyun denso drona dene kepar yores yuda yores so di tawa konso nangula tawa gi kepar chikdus dene tawa denso samsam gelwa dapo chik chagire duas dene di kola kandes samlo tangres di risu kandes lagare risu meba chene droya yomares karen sena tawa denso koronso gi tawa res ro
Mara martate nganzo kale yunga rawas tawa teju ta me gichane khana latu gichane tez mandawa chimbo yar mato tenta la ma le grist garo me banda wo chu yar tate nganzo kale kale leje mo.
So Geshe said that actually as we move through these teachings, he's going to give a lot of explanation on this particular point. But what he would say here is that when explaining the view, at first, it might seem that there are significant differences. But if you look at the realization as it unfolds from those views, then the differences actually start to seem less important. Right? They'll start to seem less important. But in terms of the way of explanation, yes, there are some differences, and the differences can help us to sharpen our intelligence. And like what to speak of non-sectarianism, like even within the Gelugpa, like Drepung and Ganden and Sera, they'll explain different philosophical points quite differently, actually. And that's even just in kind of one school of Tibetan Buddhism. But Geshe said, okay, well, you know, say that makes us like Tawa Mandrawa Res Halaya Madurwa. But, you know, it's only, so what's wrong if they're expressing different views? Would be his response to that. Like, okay, so they're expressing like different views. So there's some differences in terms of the views, but that doesn't have to mean that they're wrong, right? Yeah. So just because they're expressing different views doesn't mean that one has to be wrong and one has to be right.
Well, that is an issue, or rather that is a question I think about, because when we study the tenet, we say you go from the lower school to the higher school, and then the highest view is prasangika. And then my question is that, would I be able to reach enlightenment if I say like I hold the Chitta Mantra view, a lower view? And the answer that I've been getting from my Gelug teacher is no, you need the highest view. The highest meaning, like Lama Tsongkhapa say, you know, you need to hit the bullseye, hit the right at, you need to get the object of negation precisely. Otherwise, you miss the mark. So the difference in the view here has to do with also the difference of object of negation. So it's not like I want to be right. I want to know that I'm on the right track.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yene nganso drupta mawa jidro na rwa di samlo tangna dene nganso morong gelu gilamba denso nga sem sampa nyamlen chena dene jangshu top tugiribes rwa lam tamala lev tugiribes dene konso mares nganso tel gyurgi tawa gyune drogores maltok jangshu toshidi tobya yomares dene di samlo tangna tawa ke champores karin sen nganso gaksha di data hakogres matok nganso dawachi drone dene ko data chik drogires dus manto jen pendot mendus lama tsonkape gi sunsoa roa dene gaksha kola kotang mindrawa yona dene nganso degarang chik gogires ane degarang di marana nganso jangshu toya yomares dene semgi nangla dites debo yogiresa
말 다때 밀 라도 제바치래 마도 대를 샤게 딜라
yeah
소소소 따와데 야도 되고 뭐 샤용 거 아니스 나 나왕이네 돼
yeah
메텔 아마사게 빌라바 노지
yeah
말레바 이나요
yeah
소소 군요레제 드와요 드리서 고잔도 베디 소소소 따와티가 따와 셀 샤도지 발레 용 아니스 칼레
So Geshe would like agree that it's correct Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of the object of negation and so forth, like from the reasoning point of view. But what words and what a debate manual cannot express is what is arising in the mind. So many other practitioners may use different names for things or have a slightly different kind of like, I don't know how to say it, like splitting hairs of philosophy, slightly different hair splits of philosophy, but realization may be unfolding in their minds, and the understanding that they'll come to, that's actually what determines whether the practice is going to get you enlightened.
롱가 만다와 뭐지라고 지레스 가시가 롱가 되는 거 가서 된다 레도 그러면 레살라
So Geshe would say, don't worry so much about different people saying this is kind of like the path that you need to follow because that path is going to lead you to this place. If ultimately all the paths are being able to lead you to the same destination, just pick the path that's comfortable for you.
다 롱가 노비가 가시를 시도요 벤다시 자가를 가시 시도 매번 대시 자가를 매도 들어요 그 사고요 벤다시 남라 이거 주기로
Some people will say you have to follow, like as you follow the path, you have to make sure that you follow the path that has the restaurant or the truck stop beside it because you're going to need to go in there. Other people are going to tell you that you need to follow a path that has a lot of big trees on it so that it's like well shaded and so forth. Some people are going to say that the path that you need to walk in needs to have beautiful flowers and gardens to look at so that you don't get bored. But as long as the path are taking you to the city that you're trying to go to, then it's a matter of preference in a way. Right? So if all the paths are reaching the same destination, you can't scold your friend saying, you're going on the wrong road. My road has beautiful flowers on it, right? Because the road is still going to take you to the destination. So that would be Geshe-la's outlook on that. But you are absolutely correct, right, that these different paths have their own different particular characteristics, especially with the finer points that are explained. Yes, like Geshe-la wouldn't deny that. Yeah. Ale. Dila gurebes. So one of Lama Tsongkhapa's students asked him, based upon what you have taught us, Father, must we therefore criticize or dismiss those paths that are explained differently? Lama Tsongkhapa said, no, you must absolutely not, because paths can lead to realization, and if one does that, one incurs the fault of abandoning Dharma. So actually, this is in one of the biographies of Tsongkhapa.
아고서 어다 치루스 소소게 따와테 다가로뇨 레젠델 투바시에케도 시부터만 몸버테 차와라 다데도 말해서 하지는 요.
Like, if we look at it like, okay, there might be like particular flavors of view of these different lineages and so forth, but all lineages have beings of realizations within them. And if all lineages have beings of realization within them, then they are all worthy of our respect. We'll come to more discussion of this, and in fact, Dza Patrul Rinpoche has a lot to say about this. So as we continue, we'll find out more.
Thank you. I probably will come back to this later. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Yes, we have a short question here from YouTube. To read tantric texts, would I require empowerment or transmission?
Nanso na gi jung tayala wang shugorebesa. Yes, you require empowerment. Yes.
Okay. That's it.
Because getting the empowerment is almost like the head and the eyes that will allow you to understand what's in the text. So you need it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's it from social media. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So Geshe said, do you want the story now or do you want him to do it later?
I was thinking of that. We still have a lot of people here, but
me mumbo this. Yeah, and I don't know, like if some people feel they missed out, this will be available later, right, Dave? So they can watch it later if they want.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So Geshe is going to do the story in that case.
Hooray.
Yeah. So this is a story once again from the time of the fifth Dalai Lama. And at the time of the fifth Dalai Lama, he had an acquaintance, we could say a contemporary perhaps, who was known as Lama Rabjampa. And according to common appearances, Rabjampa was somebody who was always giving the fifth Dalai Lama a lot of problems. So at the particular time, the fifth Dalai Lama was in meditation retreat, and so an announcement was made, that the Dalai Lama must not be disturbed. Ale. Ale, loso cha lusadi. Yeah, Hagasan. And so, of course, the fifth Dalai Lama, he wasn't able to go out during that time in retreat, but he was thinking about the many nice things that you could procure in Lhasa. And in particular, I'm not sure if anybody has seen the pictures of the monks in old Tibet, but you'll see kind of sometimes their robes attached to that on the front. There's like this big square kind of brocade cloth, which is said to be like a tea strainer, I believe. So Geshe said that the fifth Dalai Lama was thinking about beautiful brocade through which one of those could be made during his retreat. And so Rabjampa, he possessed some clairvoyance, so he knew that during the retreat, the fifth Dalai Lama was thinking about that. So he came to his retreat house to visit him. And so the bodyguard, of course, would not let him through because he said, the Dalai Lama is in retreat, like we can't disturb him. But Rabjampa was very insistent. Yeah, and so Rabjampa was such a powerful being, in fact, that it is said that like certain beneficial deities like Nechung and so forth, they would follow his orders. Ale. Ale,
가서 라산도 되는데.
And so he came back again, and again the bodyguard told the Rabjampa that we told you that the Dalai Lama is not to be disturbed. He's in a meditation retreat. And so Rabjampa, he replied, he's not in a meditation retreat. I saw him in Lhasa. If he's in retreat, why did I see him in Lhasa?
라산도 기시 잘했던지 녀야지 기시 저지 녀니 안도서 왔어.
Yeah, he said, I saw him in a brocade shop getting some brocade cuts. So I know that he's not in retreat.
근데 거다 할래. 사실은 내 몸을 알수 라말 깨졌지. 내 머리한테 모든 게 깨져.
And then he said, you know, if you don't believe me, then check for yourselves. Check with the Dalai Lama. Ask him.
라마 사이하도 어디들은 세긴데스 지는 지금 저들이 라고서 라마게 무셔서.
And so the bodyguard said to the fifth Dalai Lama, you know, that this guy's saying that you're not in retreat. He said that he saw you in the brocade shop in Lhasa. And actually, the Dalai Lama found it quite funny, so he started to chuckle.
어다 된다든지 어다 때까지 저기 아버지라면 왔어.
So Geshe said that's the story, just about being somewhere, but the mind being distracted. And see, he finds it a funny story, but also maybe it might offend some, so he apologizes if it causes any offense. So that's the first story of the fifth Dalai Lama and the Rabjampa, and he will tell another story about the fifth and the Rabjampa next time. Shambhala. Oh, right. And so Rabjampa was said to be kind of an attained being who was able to be reborn in Shambhala. So some of the stories are talking like that. And actually there's also some stories about how eventually Rabjampa, he started to sort of annoy Nechung. So Nechung, right, the Pehar deity, he would try to do things to kind of like trip up Rabjampa, but he was never able to succeed. Yeah, so he kind of blocked Nechung from a lot of things when he was in the world. So there's a lot of stories related to that as well. But Nechung finally got his revenge, which is when Rabjampa was ready to ascend to the Shambhala Pure Land, Nechung was able to block him a little bit. Yeah. Shato sina Mingi Shokuti. Yeah. Ale, loso. Yeah. Sola teza sola kapla. Ale, ko logo chunso. Di ko kandes barche soson. Sola chik sola. Ale. Ale, su. Neshu. Ale, loso. So, yeah, Hagosung. So, one of the things that Rabjampa did, di ko kewa jema drope kaplo ko barche sonne di barche mepo so egiche. Ale, right. So, in order to stop Nechung from blocking him from being able to go to the Shambhala heaven, right, Rabjampa had to come up with a plan. So what he did was somehow he got access to the lists, right? He knew he was going to be dying soon. So he got access to the lists that had to be read out at the monastic assembly. They read the list of the sponsors after the prayer. And in this list, he composed a really long composition extolling the virtues of His Holiness the Fifth Dalai Lama. And because Nechung was so devoted to the Dalai Lamas, he knew that he would be transfixed by hearing this. So then that was kind of the distraction, and then he was able to pass away and get into Shambhala without Nechung interfering. And it is said actually as they got sort of halfway through this composition extolling the virtues, Nechung thought, wait a second, I'm being tricked here. Yeah. And it said he kind of was able to catch on to a little bit of Rabjampa as he was ascending to Shambhala or something like that, but he arrived there too late to really be able to stop him. He grabbed the very bottom of his lower robe, but by then Rabjampa was already well on his way. He wasn't able to stop him. Yeah. So Geshe will end it here then. That's the story he was going to tell this time, and we'll have more for next time. Oh, Tashi Dele, take care everyone.
Thank
Enjoy the
you.
rest